Lieutenant Mara Holt sat hunched over a desk in the dimly lit operations center, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The room buzzed with the usual hum of urgency. A dozen other officers worked around her, but Mara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something more than just the usual bureaucratic nightmares or logistical failures that usually plagued Earth's defense forces. The message she was reading was marked Top Secret. It was from Ambassador Alina Voss, Earth's most trusted envoy in the Galactic Council, and had arrived just hours before her disappearance. "They're coming for me, Mara. I've uncovered something terrible. The Alliance was never about peace." The message ended there, abruptly, as if cut off mid-sentence. Mara's brow furrowed. She'd known Voss for years. They had served together during the early phases of Earth's first interstellar diplomacy. Voss had always been unflappable, calm, collected, and far too strategic to let her guard down. To hear that she might be in danger, and to receive such a cryptic message, made the hairs on the back of Mara's neck stand on end. "She's gone, isn't she?" someone said, pulling Mara from her thoughts. She turned to face Commander Gareth Hines, a seasoned officer and her closest confidant. He was tall, with a scar running down the side of his face from a skirmish years ago, his eyes full of concern but also disbelief. He'd known Voss too, though not as closely as Mara. "No, not yet," Mara replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "She's out there somewhere, and she's trying to warn us." Hines looked at the encrypted message again, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "You think it's connected to the new sector reports, the anomalies we've been seeing on the outer rim?" Mara nodded, already digging through more data. For months, strange energy surges had been detected near the fringes of Earth's controlled space, around a sector long believed to be uninhabited. Communications had been erratic, often garbled or completely cut off, but the anomalies were growing. They weren't just energy fluctuations anymore. They were precise, deliberate, almost as if someone was trying to communicate, and that someone was not human. The silence in the room grew thick as the officers processed the weight of her words. A betrayal, a hidden enemy. The same thought kept hammering at the back of Mara's mind, like an insistent drumbeat. "I need clearance to investigate this," Mara said, her voice low but resolute. Hines hesitated. "You know how this works. The Council won't authorize anything unless we have concrete evidence." Mara clenched her fists. "Then I'll find the evidence." Before Hines could reply, the doors to the operations center slid open. A junior officer stepped inside, his face pale. "Lieutenant Holt, Commander Hines, there's something you need to see." They followed him down the narrow corridor, tension building in every step. When they reached the monitoring bay, the officer pointed to a large screen. It displayed a live video feed from one of Earth's deep space satellites. The view was chaotic, the camera shaking violently. But there at the edge of the system, something was there, something huge. The officer's voice trembled as he spoke. "Something's coming through the anomaly. It looks like a fleet." The image stabilized for a brief moment, and what Mara saw sent a chill through her spine. Hundreds of ships, sleek and alien, emerged from the black void, their lights blinking like the cold eyes of predators. Her heart raced. The lurkers, the very race Voss had warned them about, and now the time for warning was over. "Activate the emergency protocol," Mara ordered. "We're at war." Hines nodded, his face grim. As the room erupted into frantic activity, Mara took a deep breath, steadying herself for the storm ahead. But deep down, she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just an alien invasion, it was personal. Earth had been betrayed, and she would uncover the truth no matter the cost. Mara stood before the massive holographic map of Earth's defense perimeter, her fingers tapping anxiously as the data streamed across the screen. Hundreds of enemy ships had now been detected, and they were closing in on Earth's borders. But it wasn't just the ships that disturbed her, it was the way they moved. There was a deliberate precision to their course, almost as if they knew exactly where to strike. Whoever had made the deal with the lurkers had given them inside knowledge. "Something's wrong," Mara muttered under her breath, leaning closer to the map. She felt the weight of her thoughts pressing on her, like a physical force. Why now? Why wait until they're in position to launch an invasion? Commander Hines, his expression tight with concern, joined her. "You're thinking what I'm thinking, aren't you?" She nodded. "This isn't an invasion. It's a trigger. The ships are just the first phase. They've been preparing for this moment." Hines crossed his arms. "A coordinated strike. We've been blindsided." Mara's eyes flicked to the corner of the room, where a quiet technician had just brought up a list of high-ranking officials who had been in contact with the alien factions in recent years. Among them, one name stood out: Ambassador Elena Voss. Her name was at the top of a list of key diplomats who had made several trips to the outer colonies, all under the guise of expanding Earth's diplomatic reach. But as Mara read between the lines, a disturbing pattern emerged. These trips had been linked to covert negotiations, not peace treaties, but something far darker. "This is it," Mara said, her voice tinged with a mixture of anger and dread. Voss was in on it. Hines looked over her shoulder, his eyes narrowing. "You think she was part of the conspiracy?" "I think she discovered it," Mara corrected him. "And now she's gone, possibly dead. Whoever is behind this wanted her out of the way." The weight of the realization hit her hard. Elena Voss had been the voice of reason in Earth's diplomatic community. If she had uncovered something so terrible, something so insidious, that she had been silenced, it meant there was no one left who could stand against it. The technician who had been monitoring the data nervously cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Holt, there's something else." Mara turned. "What is it?" "We've intercepted a transmission," the technician said, his voice low and shaky. "It's encrypted, but we've managed to trace it to a secure location on Mars." Hines leaned in. "Mars? That's a dead zone. What could possibly be on Mars that the lurkers would want?" "Not the lurkers," Mara said sharply. "Humans. Someone on Mars has been communicating with them. They've been keeping this under wraps for years." The technician confirmed what Mara feared. The transmission was old, too old, but it had been reactivated recently, a signal sent from deep beneath Mars' surface. The encrypted message was from a source she knew all too well: Colonel Samuel Graves. Graves had been one of Earth's finest officers, a veteran of the early interstellar wars. But after the last conflict, he had vanished, his whereabouts unknown. Now, Mara found herself staring at his name, wondering if he had been a part of this betrayal all along. "Graves?" Hines asked, his voice full of disbelief. "He disappeared after the war, and now he's linked to this." Mara's mind raced. It was no coincidence that Graves' disappearance aligned with the rise of alien activity around the solar system. And if he was involved with the lurkers, if he was the one orchestrating Earth's downfall, then everything she had known about him was a lie. "Mara," Hines said, pulling her out of her spiraling thoughts, "what do we do now?" Mara's jaw tightened as she made her decision. "We go to Mars. We find Graves, and we uncover the truth. We've been played, and now it's time to take the fight to them." As the crew scrambled to prepare a covert mission, Mara couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of urgency. They weren't just up against an alien threat, they were up against their own. Whoever had betrayed Earth, whoever had sold them out to the lurkers, had played humanity like pawns in a game. And now they were going to pay for it. Mara's fingers hovered over the controls, the holographic map flickering before her. The next phase of the operation would take them to Mars, a place of secrets and shadows. If she didn't find the truth there, they might all be lost. "I'll be ready," Mara said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of what was to come. With that, the countdown to Mars began. The time for questioning was over. The time for action had arrived, and Mara Holt was ready to expose the conspiracy, no matter the cost. The journey to Mars was swift but tense. As Mara sat in the command seat of the small, covert strike shuttle, her mind raced. They had only a limited amount of time before the Lurker fleet made their move. The tech team had decrypted the signal from Mars, and it led to a vast underground facility hidden beneath the red planet's desolate surface. What they would find there could turn the tide of the war, or condemn them all. Mara glanced over at Commander Hines, who was seated across from her, checking the shuttle's systems one last time. His face was a mask of determination, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "If Graves is behind all this," he started, his voice trailing off. "Why Mars? Why an abandoned base?" "Because no one would look there," Mara replied, her tone sharp. "Mars is a wasteland, a graveyard of humanity's failed projects. If Graves and his collaborators wanted to hide their secrets, this was the perfect place. Perfect place for a trap, too." Mara met his gaze. "I don't think we're walking into a trap. If they wanted to stop us, they would have already sent someone to intercept us." But even as she said it, doubt crept into her mind. They were going into the unknown, and there was no telling what they would find once they landed. The shuttle's engines hummed as it pierced Mars' thin atmosphere, the red terrain sprawling out beneath them like an endless desert. The landscape looked eerily quiet, with the faintest trace of dust clouds swirling in the wind. Mars had once been a symbol of human ambition, a planet that had hosted the first great interplanetary colony efforts. Now it was a tomb. The shuttle landed with a soft thud, its stabilizers locking into place on the dry surface. The team disembarked quickly, taking cover behind the shuttle as they surveyed their surroundings. The only sound was the soft whine of the engines powering down. "I'm not detecting any immediate threats," said the lead technician, Sergeant Lee, after scanning the area. "It's clear, Lieutenant, but I'm reading strange energy signatures from below ground. The facility is deep." Mara nodded. "We knew that already. Let's move." They made their way toward the entrance, a nondescript hatch built into the side of a canyon-like cliff. The surface was ancient, with cracks running through the once pristine steel. After hacking into the lock, they descended into the darkened depths of the base. The cold, dry air of the Martian surface gave way to the artificial atmosphere of the underground facility. The walls were lined with dust, cobwebs, and signs of long-abandoned technology. Yet, as they moved deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, Mara could feel it, a presence. Someone, or something, had been here recently. "Keep your eyes open," Mara whispered, signaling her team to stay alert. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence became. It was as if the facility was holding its breath, waiting for something. As they rounded a corner, Mara caught sight of a massive chamber, its steel doors slightly ajar. The flicker of dim emergency lights within hinted at something still functioning inside. "Here we go," Hines said, his voice tight. "What do you think we'll find?" "Answers," Mara replied, her pulse quickening. They pushed the door open, revealing a command center still operational, though clearly neglected. Flickering screens displayed images of Earth, of fleets of symbols she didn't recognize. At the center of it all was a console, untouched by time, with one glowing icon pulsing faintly on the screen. Graves. Mara approached the console, her hands shaking as she activated it. The screen blinked to life, and a voice, one she hadn't heard in years, echoed through the chamber. "Welcome, Mara Holt." Her heart skipped a beat. It was Colonel Graves, his voice distorted but unmistakable. The screen shifted to show a recording of him standing in front of a map of Earth and the galaxy. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was something in his expression that sent a chill down Mara's spine. "If you're seeing this, it means you found the truth," Graves' voice continued, tinged with something unidentifiable. "The Lurkers are not our enemies, Mara. They never were. Earth's future lies with them. This is where humanity's true destiny begins." The message cut off abruptly, leaving Mara standing in stunned silence. Her mind was a whirlpool of conflicting emotions: betrayal, confusion, anger. "We've been played, haven't we?" Hines said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Mara turned to him, her face a mixture of fury and disbelief. Graves wasn't just a soldier, Hines. He was the architect. He sold us out. The truth was clear now. The aliens weren't here to conquer. They were here to coexist, but only under the control of a small faction of humanity that had bargained away Earth's independence for their own survival. They had never intended to defend humanity from the Lurkers. They were the Lurkers' partners. "Graves is alive," Mara said, her voice like steel, "and he's not just hiding on Mars. He's orchestrated this whole damn thing." Just then, a sudden explosion rattled the walls, sending dust and debris falling from the ceiling. The alarms blared to life, and the lights flickered. They weren't alone anymore. "Get to the exit," Mara shouted, drawing her weapon. "Now!" As they sprinted down the corridors, the sound of footsteps, faint but growing louder, echoed behind them. Someone, or something, was coming for them. And this time, it wasn't just a conspiracy. They were fighting for their lives. Mara's heart hammered in her chest as she led her team through the twisting corridors of the underground facility. The explosion had sent them into a full sprint, the sound of their boots pounding against the steel floors, almost drowning out the distant echoes of approaching footsteps. Whoever, or whatever, was behind them was getting closer, and with each step, the feeling that they had walked directly into a trap intensified. The emergency lights flickered erratically, casting long, disorienting shadows on the walls. Dust hung in the air, thick and choking, but Mara didn't slow down. She had to stay focused. They could still make it out, alive with answers. "Lieutenant," Sergeant Lee's voice cut through the chaos. "We've got company. Movement up ahead. 2, maybe 3. No, wait. More." Mara skidded to a halt at the next intersection, scanning the darkened passage. She had been expecting an ambush. Graves' message had been too perfectly timed, and the base itself had been too easy to access. They had been set up, but by who? The betrayal was far deeper than just Graves. "Fall back," Mara barked. "Double time." The team reversed course, taking a narrow maintenance passage that ran parallel to the main hall. But as they rounded the corner, the distinct sound of footsteps shifted from a distant echo to a deafening crescendo. The trap had been set, and they had walked right into it. "Contact," Hines yelled as gunfire rang out from the dark. The first shot missed, but the second ricocheted off a nearby wall, narrowly missing Mara's shoulder. She dove behind a bulkhead, pulling her weapon from its holster in one smooth motion. "Return fire," she shouted, her voice steady despite the growing urgency. "We need to keep them pinned." Lee was already setting up his rifle, eyes narrowed in concentration. The team took cover behind anything they could find, but it was clear they were outgunned. The sound of the enemy's weapons, much more advanced than their own, echoed down the corridor, sending a chilling message. They weren't fighting against rebels or random mercenaries. Whoever was in charge of the ambush had access to military-grade tech. "This isn't right," Mara muttered under her breath, scanning the area. "They're waiting for us to make a move." Suddenly, the lights flickered one last time, plunging the corridor into complete darkness. The sounds of combat, once sharp and chaotic, now faded into an eerie stillness. The silence was suffocating. A voice, calm and cold, suddenly crackled over the comms. "Lieutenant Holt, I must say I'm impressed. You've made it farther than I expected." Mara's breath caught in her throat. The voice was unmistakable. "Graves," she muttered, a sickening feeling crawling up her spine. "Yes, it's me," Graves' voice replied, smooth as ever, though there was a sharpness to it now, like a predator relishing in the hunt. "I've been waiting for this moment for quite some time. You see, Mara, you and your team walked right into my web. This was always meant to happen." "You?" Mara's voice was hoarse with disbelief. "You've been working with the Lurkers all along. You're the one who betrayed Earth." Graves chuckled, the sound distorted and distant over the comms. Betrayed? Oh no, I've simply evolved, Mara. Earth was never meant to stand alone. The galaxy doesn't care for your fragile borders. It's time for humanity to adapt. The lurkers are the key to survival, and you, my dear, are the last obstacle standing in the way. The wall seemed to close in around her as she processed his words. Evolved? Adapt? Graves had completely abandoned the principles he had fought for, betrayed humanity's trust, and now he stood at the head of a conspiracy to sell Earth's future to the highest bidder. And to think, she had once trusted him as a leader. We won't let you do this, Mara spat, her hands gripping her weapon tighter. Oh, but it's already too late, Graves replied, his voice colder than ever. The lurkers will arrive soon. The ships are already at Earth's doorstep. Once they're in orbit, there won't be a thing you can do to stop us. Not when you're already inside our network. Mara's mind raced. They had been playing catch-up this entire time, moving like pawns on a chessboard that Graves had already set in motion. They were surrounded, not just by soldiers, but by the very infrastructure that Graves had put into place. A distant sound, like the hum of an engine, interrupted her thoughts. It was coming from the walls themselves, mechanisms shifting, systems engaging. They weren't just trapped by soldiers. The facility had been reactivated, likely by Graves himself. "Commander," she shouted, voice urgent, "we need to move. Now." The air around them hummed with the deep rumble of mechanical movements, and before Mara could process what was happening, the floor beneath them cracked open, revealing hidden passageways they hadn't known existed. This wasn't just a facility, it was a fortress, a maze designed to hold them captive. "We've got to find the source of this," Hines said, his voice tight with resolve. Mara nodded. "We'll cut off the head of this snake. But first, we fight." With renewed urgency, they prepared for a full assault, determined to break through the trap Graves had set. But time was running out, the enemy was closing in, and every step they took forward was another step deeper into the heart of the web. The rumbling beneath their feet grew louder, and the wall seemed to close in with every passing second. The facility's hidden passageways had opened wide, and the team was forced to keep moving, the sound of enemy footsteps echoing behind them, growing closer with every step. The air was thick with tension as Mara and her team pushed forward into the labyrinthine depths of the underground base, not knowing whether they were advancing to salvation or a more dangerous trap. The walls, once silent and sterile, now thrummed with the activity of long-dormant machinery awakening to life. Screens flickered back to life as they passed, displaying cryptic data and maps of Earth and Mars, as well as strange symbols that Mara couldn't decipher. The disorienting hums of the facility's power systems made it clear that they were no longer just intruders. They were intruders in the heart of something much larger than they had ever imagined. "I don't like this, Lieutenant," Hines said, his voice tight. "This place isn't just some forgotten facility. It's still a part of something much bigger." "I know," Mara replied, her voice low but resolute. "Graves has turned it into a fortress. He's prepared for this, and I don't think he's going to let us walk out alive." They rounded another corner and came to a massive steel door, an imposing structure with a series of glowing panels and thick wires snaking through the walls. Mara approached cautiously, motioning for Lee to check for traps. "Looks like it's sealed tight," Lee muttered, scanning the door with a handheld device. "But I can bypass the lock. Give me a minute." The team took cover as Lee worked his tech magic, fingers flying over his pad as he decoded the security lock. The faint sounds of footsteps in the distance continued to grow closer, the enemies clearly closing in on their position. Mara's eyes darted back and forth, every second counting. Finally, with a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a vast command center, bathed in the pale glow of monitor screens. The walls were lined with advanced equipment, its purpose unclear to Mara, but its significance unmistakable. In the center of the room stood a large circular console, encircled by intricate holographic projections of Earth, Mars, and strange symbols that were part of Graves' dark conspiracy. "This is it," Hines said quietly. "The heart of the operation." Mara moved toward the console, her mind racing. She could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about stopping something much more dangerous. A hidden alliance between Graves and the Lurkers, something that could alter the entire course of humanity's future. The holograms flickered, shifting to display a series of ships, massive alien vessels, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. As the projections moved, Mara could see their positions, stationed just outside Earth's orbit, ready to strike. "This isn't a peace deal," Mara whispered, her face a mask of fury. "This is an invasion, and Graves has given them the go-ahead." Lee's voice broke the tension. "I'm scanning the data. These ships, these aren't just Lurker warships. They're controlled by something else." "What do you mean?" Mara asked, turning toward him. "I mean that someone is pulling the strings," Lee said, tapping a few keys to zoom in on a specific ship. "This ship has a neural link, something human. Someone has wired themselves into the system." A cold shiver ran down Mara's spine. "Graves? Not just Graves," Hines interrupted. "Look here." He pointed to a dark figure in the projection, its features obscured by a red glare. "This is a person, a human, but someone different." The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Graves wasn't working alone. Someone else, someone even higher up, has been orchestrating this entire conspiracy. Suddenly, an alarm blared, its shrill sound rattling the team's nerves. The entire room went into lockdown. The lights turned red, and a voice came over the intercom, distorted but unmistakable. "Lieutenant Holt, you have found what you weren't supposed to, but it's already too late." Mara turned sharply toward the door, but it slammed shut before they could escape. Heavy machinery began moving in the walls, sealing them in. From the dark corners of the room, armed guards began to emerge, their weapons raised and aimed directly at Mara and her team. "I gave you a chance to understand, Mara," Graves' voice crackled through the comms, taunting. "But now you must face the consequences of your refusal to accept the inevitable. Humanity's future lies with the Lurkers. The Earth must surrender to them." "We're not surrendering," Mara growled, raising her weapon. "And we're not stopping now." With a swift motion, she aimed and fired, taking down the closest guard. The room erupted into chaos as her team opened fire, their weapons barely holding back the flood of soldiers pouring from hidden doors. But the battle felt like a losing fight. The Lurkers had already infiltrated Earth's command infrastructure. They had allies in places Mara had never expected. "Get to the control room," Mara yelled, cutting down another enemy. "We end this now." But even as she spoke, the feeling that they were trapped, completely surrounded, grew. Was this how Graves had planned it all along? She couldn't let him win. The future of humanity depended on it. The chaos in the command center intensified as the enemy pressed forward, more heavily armed and better coordinated than Mara had anticipated. Her team was skilled, but outnumbered, and every inch gained felt like a battle they couldn't afford to lose. The heavy thuds of boots against steel reverberated through the facility as Mara's team fought tooth and nail to stay in control. Mara ducked behind a pillar, narrowly avoiding a hail of bullets, and peeked around the corner. Hines and Lee were covering the entrance, their weapons blasting through the haze of smoke that now filled the air. They had to make it to the control room, where the master terminal for the facility's systems was located. The key to stopping Graves and the Lurkers was there, but with every second that passed, the chances of reaching it alive grew slimmer. "Lee, we need an exit plan," Mara shouted, her voice strained with urgency. "If we can't get to the terminal, we'll have to make our way to the surface. Do you have a route mapped?" "I'm working on it," Lee shouted back, his fingers flying over his tablet as he scanned the data. "But we're running out of time. They've locked down the entire facility. All the exits are sealed. Then we make our own exit, Mara muttered through gritted teeth. She fired another round, taking down 2 guards who were closing in on their position. The enemy wasn't just armed, they were tactical, knowing where to strike and how to flank them. We're not getting out through the front, Hines said, checking the ammo in his weapon. We need to breach one of the walls. Mara nodded, understanding the urgency in his tone. Get the charge ready. I'll cover you. As Hines set the explosive charge to breach a section of the wall, Mara could hear the enemy soldiers closing in from the other side. The sounds of gunfire were relentless, a steady background noise to the growing tension in the air. The seconds seemed to stretch, each one filled with the weight of knowing that failure meant death, not just for them, but for all of Earth. The explosive charge peaked once, signaling it was ready. Hines stepped back, signaling the team to take cover. 5 seconds, he yelled, the detonator in his hand. The blast rang out with a deafening roar, sending a shockwave through the command center. The section of the wall collapsed in a shower of debris, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel leading deeper into the facility. Go, 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 Mara shouted, leading the charge through the newly created opening. They sprinted down the dark corridor, the echo of their footsteps drowned by the thundering sound of the explosion behind them. The faint glow of emergency lights flickered overhead, casting a pale, ghostly illumination on the walls. As they moved, the air grew thicker, stale, recycled, and filled with a sense of imminent doom. Lee was the first to speak. We're not safe yet. We've only bought ourselves a few minutes at best. Mara nodded, her mind working furiously. They had to get to the control room. They had to stop Graves and the lurkers, or Earth's fate would be sealed. Ahead of them, a distant hum filled the air, growing louder with every step. It was a low mechanical thrum, vibrating through the walls of the facility. Something was coming, something big. They were running out of time. I can't access the main terminal from here, Lee said, voice tight with frustration. But there's a secondary control panel ahead. If I can access it, I might be able to shut down some of the facility's systems. At least give us a chance. Mara's instincts screamed that every second spent in this facility brought them closer to their demise, but she couldn't afford to ignore Lee's suggestion. Do it, she ordered. We'll cover you. They came to a sudden stop in front of a reinforced door, the design far more sophisticated than the other entrances they had encountered. Lee moved quickly, pulling out a portable hacking device from his pack and connecting it to a small access port hidden near the doorframe. The whir of machinery sounded as the device went to work, bypassing layers of security in seconds. Mara stood at the ready, weapon in hand, as the rest of the team kept watch. The minutes felt like hours. Every corner of the facility seemed to hold the promise of danger. She could feel her nerves taut, her pulse racing in her ears. Almost there, Lee muttered, eyes fixed on the screen of his device. A few more seconds, and they would either have the door open or be surrounded. Then, a sharp crackling sound over the comms made her freeze. Mara, came the familiar, too calm voice. Graves, you've made it this far, but I'm afraid the game is over. The lurkers are already on their way to Earth, and no matter what you do now, it won't matter. Humanity will bow to us. Mara's jaw clenched as she stared at the door in front of her. Graves was not just a traitor, he was a true believer in the cause. And now, that cause was going to mean humanity's extinction. But Mara wasn't about to give in. Not now, not ever. Not if I have anything to say about it, she growled as the door finally slid open. Lee's eyes lit up as the system came online, displaying a flood of data on the screen. I'm in. I've got access to some of the control systems. We can slow them down. Mara's voice was hard and determined. Then let's make it count. Mara's heart pounded as the control panel flickered to life before her, the stream of data cascading across the screen. Lee was already pulling up information, sifting through layers of encrypted files, bypassing one after another with practiced precision. But even as the numbers and codes flowed, She knew the odds were closing in on them. The enemy was too strong, and time was running out. "Lee," Mara said, her voice sharp, "we need to disable their communication systems. If we can cut off their coordination, we might have a shot at buying ourselves enough time." "I'm on it," Lee replied, his fingers dancing over the screen as he hacked into the facility's comms network. The hum of the machinery in the tunnel around them seemed to grow louder, like a warning that the clock was ticking down to 0. The walls trembled again, as if in response to the growing tension. Hines and the others were positioned near the door, weapons ready, scanning the dark tunnel for any sign of the enemy. Mara didn't like the feeling in her gut. She could hear their footsteps now, moving fast and purposefully. "We've got company," Hines muttered. "At least a dozen guards headed this way, and they're not coming alone." Mara gritted her teeth. "Lee, I need that system now. We don't have time for anything else." "I'm almost there," Lee said, his voice focused. He paused for a brief moment, scanning the screen with intense concentration. "Got it. I've isolated their comm channels. They won't be able to coordinate any attacks for the next 10 minutes. "Good," Mara said, her eyes narrowing. "Now we make it count." Before they could move forward, a distant rumble echoed through the facility, followed by a terrifyingly loud hiss. The ground shifted beneath them, and the lights flickered once again. The sound of rushing air filled the space as pressure doors slammed shut, trapping them within. "Damn it," Mara swore. "We've been cut off. We're locked in." "We have to move," Lee said, his voice urgent as he quickly looked over the control terminal. "I've triggered a shutdown of all non-essential systems, but it won't hold for long. You need to get to the command center. It's the only place left with full access." "No way we can hold that," Hines said, glancing at the team. "We'll be swarmed." Mara was already thinking, her mind racing. There's only one way out of this. We go for the heart of their operation. We take out Graves, and we do it now. "But we're still surrounded," Lee protested. "They've got the whole facility on lock." Mara looked around the room. They were running low on ammo, and the team was exhausted. They couldn't keep up the fight for much longer. The next few moments would decide everything. The path ahead would be perilous, but they had no choice but to press on. "We push forward," Mara said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We fight our way to Graves, and we end this now." The air felt heavier with each passing second, as if the very walls of the facility were closing in around them. But Mara was ready. Her mind was sharp, her resolve steeled by everything she had fought for. The future of humanity, the lives of those who had already fallen, and the countless innocents who had no idea of the conspiracy threatening their world. The team moved out, keeping their heads down as they advanced. Lee moved quickly, recalibrating his device to open another door in their path, while Hines covered their back. The tension was suffocating as they navigated the narrow passageways, every corner a potential death trap. Every step closer to their goal only amplified the risks. As they turned another corner, the unmistakable sound of boots on metal echoed toward them. The enemy was close, too close. "We've got no time," Mara said. "We fight through. On my mark." Just as she spoke, the door ahead of them slid open with a mechanical hiss. The corridor was suddenly flooded with guards, weapons drawn and ready. Without hesitation, Mara signaled her team. "Now!" The air erupted with the sounds of gunfire. Mara moved with precision, her every move calculated, taking out one enemy after another. Hines and Lee followed suit, their shots steady and true. But they were outnumbered, and every second more enemies flooded into the corridor. Mara's mind was on fire with adrenaline as she moved like a machine, her weapon blasting in a steady rhythm. She ducked behind a pillar, reloading as Lee's hacking device sent out another pulse to disable the enemy's comms again, buying them precious moments. But it was clear they needed to get to Graves and stop him before the facility fell into total lockdown. "We're almost there," Lee shouted, his voice full of hope. "The command center is just ahead. We have to take it now. Mara could see it. The hallway ahead was a narrow choke point, a perfect place to make their stand. It was now or never. We push forward, she barked. No stopping. We make it to the command center and shut this operation down. Her team followed without hesitation. Every shot they fired, every step forward was a battle fought with everything they had. It was humanity's last stand. Graves had thought he was untouchable. Now, Mara was going to prove him wrong. The command center was just ahead. The narrow corridor stretched before them, a gauntlet of enemy forces that they had to break through to reach Graves. Every step Mara took was heavy with the weight of their mission, but her resolve never wavered. If this was the final push, she would make it count. We're almost there, Lee panted, his fingers flying over his device as he worked to disable the facility's remaining defenses. The faint hum of the automated turrets could still be heard in the background, but they were no longer responding. Lee had successfully overridden their programming. We need to move faster, Mara urged, keeping her weapon aimed ahead. Once we breach this hallway, there's no turning back. We have to take out Graves and shut down the entire operation. No mercy. They advanced, moving swiftly but cautiously, knowing that every corner might hold an ambush. The sounds of boots on metal floors grew louder with every passing second. They weren't alone in this space. Graves knew they were coming. Then, without warning, the blast doors to the command center slammed shut with a resounding clang, sealing them off. Damn it. Hines cursed, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. How the hell are we supposed to get through that? Lee was already scanning the area. I can bypass the lock, but it's going to take a few seconds. Do it, Mara snapped, turning to face the team. We hold this position. No one moves until we're inside. The seconds felt like hours as Lee worked his magic on the control panel, his eyes narrowed in intense focus. The air felt charged with anticipation, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. With each passing moment, they could hear the enemy closing in, their footsteps synchronized, echoing down the hallway toward them. Done? Lee shouted triumphantly, just as the first group of soldiers rounded the corner. The blast doors opened with a hiss, revealing the command center beyond. Mara's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't hesitate. Go! They rushed forward, guns raised, but the sight that greeted them inside the command center was nothing like they had expected. Graves stood at the center, surrounded by a group of his most loyal followers. He was calm, almost serene, as if he had known this moment would come. Well, Graves said, his voice dripping with arrogance. I must admit, I didn't expect you to make it this far, but you're too late. The lurkers are already in position. Earth is doomed, and no matter what you do, you won't stop it. Mara's grip on her weapon tightened. You're a traitor, Graves, and you've already lost. A cold smile crept across Graves' face. I don't lose, Mara. I never have. Before she could respond, the room exploded with a sudden flare of gunfire. His followers opened fire, but Mara was ready. She dove for cover, her team taking their positions and returning fire with deadly precision. The battle inside the command center was a whirlwind of chaos, the air thick with gun smoke and the crackling of energy blasts. Lee hacked into the facility's main terminal, fingers moving faster than she thought possible. I'm going for the system controls. If I can take out their main servers, it'll disrupt everything. We'll at least slow the lurkers down. You've got 5 minutes, Murray yelled, her voice sharp over the sound of gunfire. We'll hold them off. Make it count. As Lee worked to breach the system, Mara and Hines moved with ruthless efficiency, cutting down Graves' followers one by one. Their determination was unwavering. They had come too far to fail now. Graves, realizing the tide was turning, began to retreat toward a reinforced doorway at the far end of the room. You can't stop me, he shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. Even if you kill me, the lurkers are already on their way. Mara shot a look at her team. We don't stop until he's gone. He's the key. They moved as one, charging forward to corner Graves before he could escape. The seconds felt like eternity, but with each passing moment, they closed the distance between them. Graves, realizing he was trapped, turned and fired at Mara, but she was too quick. In one fluid motion, she ducked behind cover and shot him in the leg, sending him sprawling to the floor. Graves grunted in pain, but the smile never left his face. You think this is over? You've won the battle, but the war... His voice faltered as Mara approached, her weapon aimed directly at him. The war is over, Mara interrupted, stepping forward with unwavering certainty. Humanity has already won. With a single shot, Mara ended the threat. Graves crumpled to the floor, his body limp and lifeless. The room fell silent, the tension dissipating in the wake of his death, but they weren't done yet. Lee was still at the terminal, his face grim. I've done what I can. The Lurkers' reinforcements won't arrive for at least a day, maybe longer. You've bought Earth some time, but we'll need more if we're going to defeat them for good. Mara took a deep breath, looking down at the lifeless form of Graves. Then we make more time, she said, her voice resolute. We'll keep fighting. Earth is still standing, and as long as we're breathing, we won't stop. As they left the command center, the weight of their victory settled over them like a mantle. The battle had been hard fought, but humanity had proved its resilience. They had uncovered the truth, and in doing so, they had saved the world, and this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, they had won.